Part 24. Someone harming the queen secretly. The next day, Xia Linxuan was sent to the morning court, and Pu Qiutai came to the study to teach the two children to read. But after reading a few words, he saw Farong walk in, and said with a smile, "Mother, this is the letter sent by the Internal Affairs Office just now." "Yes." The Internal Affairs Office also sent dozens of good skins, which are for mother and the two young masters to make winter clothes. Pu Qiutai nodded, opened the letter and only glanced at it. Then suddenly stood up and said in shock, "What? How so? Father and mother are going to move their family to the capital?" Farong stepped forward to take a look, and sure enough, she saw that the second elder of the Pu family decided to lead the whole family to move to the capital to live. She saw that Pu Qiutai was pale, so she hurriedly explained and smiled. "This is also the old man and the old lady are concerned about the mother, whether you move to the capital, with your position. You can also call the family into the palace once a month." Honglian happened to bring a plate of tea, and said with a smile, "No. The emperor said a few days ago that among these concubines, even Wei Chongzai's father has been knighted, but mother's family has not been rewarded at all, which is very unruly. Let the slave and maid see, the emperor knows that this letter must be happy. And other titles dare not say, no matter what, you have to be named an uncle of the old lady." She didn't wait to finish speaking, she was stopped by Farong with a look. And then looked at the crumbling Pu Qiutai, and then suddenly realized, yes, this master is different from other masters. Other people's families want their mother's family to be promoted to the knighthood and be their own help, but this one is even forced by the emperor step by step to enter the palace as an official. How can he hope that his family will also become a courtier or nobleman of the daimyo dynasty? Pu Qiutai didn't say anything, lowered his head and thought for a while, then walked back to the case, pulled a piece of letterhead, and wrote on it. Honglian and Farong glanced at each other. Farong hesitated. "Mother, since the old man and the old lady have the heart to move over, you just let it be. Mother is a pure filial person, can you bear to let the old man be separated from you from now on, and you can't even meet?" Pu Qiutai glanced up at them, but didn't say anything. And when he finished writing, he packed the letter, sealed the fire paint, and said to Farong, "Find a reliable person and send it out." "Mother. But all the letterheads that go out of the palace must be inspected by the Internal Affairs Office." Farong hesitated, just looking at Pu Qiutai's expression. She knew in her heart that this master was persuading the family not to move to the capital. This matter can be big or small, but once the emperor knows, I am afraid that something is wrong. "It's okay, it's not a letter of treason." Hearing Pu Qiutai say this, Honglian was helpless, so she had to take the letter and hand it to a little eunuch named Cao Sanner to take out, who was the apprentice of Jing Lianghou, the chief eunuch of Yunhai Palace, and was very reliable. When Cao Sanner came to the Internal Affairs Office, the eunuch who was in charge of picking up and reading the letters didn't dare to slack off when he heard that it was concubine Wen's family letter, so he hurriedly opened it and looked at it twice, and found that there was no problem and resealed it, and said with a smile, "It just so happens that there is a group of stagecoaches about to set off, and I will personally send it over." Cao Sanner smiled and said a few words to him, and saw that he personally delivered the letter to the stagecoach, and then the stagecoach set off. And then he turned back to the Yunhai Palace, and said that the eunuch who turned back to the Internal Affairs Office, the more he pondered the content of the letter, the more ridiculous he felt. So he was sitting in the house, he shook his head and said to himself, "Everyone says that this concubine Wen is different, and sure enough, if others have sealed their positions, they would like to announce to the world and move the whole clan into the capital, but he is good, and even persuaded his family not to move over. Before he could finish speaking, he heard a chuckle and said, "What are you muttering? Who wouldn't want to move over?" The little eunuch looked up. Yo, this is a master who dare not offend even more, so he hurriedly smiled. Sister Ruohong is here. Concubine Yan wants to send a letter to her sister again? It's really unfortunate that the stagecoach just left just now. But this is going to wait for the next one. It's not a big deal, it's okay to wait. Ruohong put the letter on the table and said, "What did you just say about moving over or not? Not concubine Wen yet? Everyone is looking forward to their families coming to Beijing and relying on each other. He is good, his family is looking forward to coming." But he wrote a letter to stop him. The little eunuch opened the seal, took out the letter and examined it, then put it on again, looked up and smiled. "Okay, put it here for an hour or two. And then send it out on a stagecoach." Ruohong was thinking about it, and when she heard what he said, she smiled and said, "Cheng, I remember what you said. If it's delayed, I'll ask you." "Yes. Where did that stagecoach go? If you go to Zhongnan, don't say that concubine Wen's letter is in a hurry." The little eunuch stood up, put concubine Yan's letter respectfully on the desk, and asked Ruohong again, "What? Is concubine Wen from Zhongnan?" He smiled and said, "What my sister said, who in the palace doesn't know? Concubine Wen mother is a great talent in Zhongnan." And his round song was not a surprise at the beginning. "Well, I really don't know, I'm not a mouthy person in the palace on weekdays." Ruohong smiled slightly, pointed to the letter on the desk and said, "Cheng, then I'll leave this to you, and I have to go back to restore my life." The little eunuch diligently sent her to the door. Here Ruohong hurried back with a quick pace, because she inquired that concubine Yan was receiving her mother and sister in the dormitory. She thought about it, and walked in by herself, and said outside the curtain, "Mother, the slave maid has something to report. It is about concubine Wen mother." Sure enough, as soon as she heard that it was about Pu Qiutai, Li Qingyu immediately let her in, and after listening to what happened, she only groaned for a while, then smiled slightly, turned her head and said to her mother, "This is really God's help. It just so happens that the mother is here, and the daughter is going to be in trouble, so I beg the mother to go back now. And immediately let my father send someone to catch up with the stagecoach and ask for concubine Wen's letter to my daughter." Who is Li Qingyu's mother and sister? When she heard her words, she knew in her heart, so she got up and left. Here she personally sent the two of them outside the palace gate, looking at the backs of the two who left in a hurry. The corners of her mouth couldn't help but show a smile. Just as she was about to turn back, she suddenly saw a palace maid hurrying over. She recognized that this was the palace maid by Wei Cheng's side, and said with a smile, "What's so urgent? Did your master send you over on purpose?" When the palace maid saw her, she hurriedly bowed down, and then said with a smile, "I often send slaves and maids to ask mother," saying that the queen mother only saw the doctor in the morning, which is the one introduced by the general, so our master wants to go with mother and concubine Luo to meet the queen mother. Oh, concubine Yan's expression moved, and after a while, she nodded lightly and said, "In this case, you go back and tell your master, let her come to me. I will change my clothes and go to concubine Luo's place with her. And then we will go together to greet the queen." The palace maid agreed, and walked away. Here Li Qingyu frowned, and couldn't help muttering, "If you cure the disease, you can't cure your life. Hee, is it a miracle doctor? It's not really a fairy, is it?" The queen mother, concubine Yan mother, concubine Luo mother and several other mother asked to see her outside the palace, saying that they wanted to greet mother. In the bedroom of the Tai Ning palace, Queen Mu Ran leaned on the bed. Qingbi walked over, looked at her cautiously, and asked in a low voice, "Mother, Can you see it? Come and say hello to me. Saw the queen snort coldly, and said with a sarcastic smile, where is the greeting for me? They obviously want to see if I'm dead or not. Before she finished speaking, she suddenly bent down and vomited, and then a stream of scarlet spurted out of his mouth, all of which stained the handkerchief in the queen's hand. Quote, exclamation mark, quote. Qingbi screamed, and hurriedly pounced on the queen to wipe her mouth with a handkerchief, while turning her head and screaming outside. Pass the imperial doctor. Don't panic, there's nothing to do, and there's no need to pass on the imperial doctor. The queen mother gasped and grabbed Qingbi with her thin hand. Go and tell those sluts, just say that I am tired and panicked at this time, and I don't need them to say goodbye, let them go back separately. Mother. Qingbi looked at the queen puzzled. This woman has always been noble and elegant, even if she doesn't like those women who use all means to invite favors, but she has never called them sluts. What's going on here? It seems that after the doctor introduced by the general came to diagnose Mother became a little abnormal. Don't. Qingbi's face was suddenly difficult to look at, and a guess sprung up in her heart. After the doctor diagnosed the queen, he talked with the queen alone for a quarter of an hour. Could it be that in this small half an hour, what happened to happen? Could it be that over the years, the queen's illness has? She didn't dare to think about it anymore. And when the queen saw her pale face, she also knew in her heart that this smart girl probably guessed something, so she couldn't help sighing and said softly, "It's nothing, don't panic. I won't die in 3 or 5 days, don't worry, before I die, I will definitely arrange all of you properly. And I can't let you be abused." The queen mother. Looking at the queen's sallow face, Qingbi couldn't help but think of the grace of this woman when she first entered the palace. Her tears poured out at once, grabbed the queen's hand and knelt in front of the bed, and cried out in a broken voice, "Don't be discouraged, Mother, you will definitely get better. Now with this doctor, you will definitely get better." The queen gasped sharply, looked out the window, and for some reason, at this time she suddenly remembered her husband, the most majestic and noble man in the world, and remembered the calm in his eyes when he lifted his hijab, and she suddenly laughed weakly. That man respects himself very much. And he is also very good to his family, especially to his younger brother. If it weren't for him, that naughty boy would not have been able to achieve such an achievement today. Yes. There is only respect, there is no love, never. Unwilling? There must be, but what does it matter? She is destined to live in a few days. And the emperor will remember her peace and restraint in the past few years, plus her brother's merits. Her family will not decline because of her death, as long as her brother has been fighting. As long as her adopted son has always been the prince, she has nothing to worry about. But those women, those vicious women who don't know where to hide and laugh heartily at the moment, she will never let go. Although she is going to die, she will never let go of each other. As soon as she thought of this, the queen coughed violently a few more times before covering her mouth with a handkerchief and whispering to Qingbi, "When I die, I plan to let a few of you go to Yunhai Palace to serve concubine Wen. What do you think?" "Mother, the slave maid is not going anywhere. The slave maid wants to follow the maiden." Qingbi's face was full of tears, but when she saw the queen shaking her head, she looked out the window, as if she was muttering to herself and seemed to be saying to Qingbi, "Concubine Wen is an indifferent person, and everything that the harem concubines want is not uncommon for him. The emperor's affection for him is true, but no one knows it, or, even if he does, he refuses to believe it. Serve him with all your heart for a few years, and when you tell him, after a few years, let him give you grace and let you go out of the palace. Qingbi, you've been in the palace since you were a child, right? You don't know how beautiful the outside world is. When I was a child, I was also in the house, and I couldn't go out when I was idle, but occasionally I could go to my sister's houses as guests, or go to the mansions of various honorable to celebrate my birthday. The outside world is very big. No matter how big the imperial city is, it is just a palm-sized sky. The Queen Mother. Qingbi wiped her tears in a panic. And the Queen's words today gave her an ominous premonition. What happened? Mother, is someone harming you? Mother, you tell the slave maid. The slave and the maid are desperate. The Queen shook her head, stretched out her hand to stop her from talking. Her eyes and tone had regained calm, and she said lightly, I don't have time now, let alone the strength to investigate. Why do you have to go to the moth to fight the fire? Don't worry, someone will clean them up for me, hee hee. The emperor is no longer the heartless and ruthless emperor. He already has a weakness, and he will not let the harem go on like this. Mother. Finally confirmed the guess in her heart. Qingbi only felt that the 5 organs were burning for a moment, and she had the heart to speak again, but she heard the Queen say lightly, It's good that this matter is rotten in your heart. Remember not to let His Royal Highness Crown Prince know. That child is already bitter enough, and this palace doesn't want him to live with this hatred. Do you understand? Yes. Slave. Got it. Qingbi nodded carelessly, and reached out to wipe her tears, but the tears were like beads with broken threads, and they couldn't be wiped clean at all. What kind of snack is this? How come I've never eaten it? It's not small. In the study of Yunhai Palace, Pu Qiutai walked in with a few plates of dim sum, and saw that Xia Linxuan was reviewing the folds, so he quietly put the plate on the table, but the next moment, his body fell into the domineering arms of a certain emperor, and when he looked up, Xia Linxuan stared at the plates of dim sum curiously and had already reached out and took out a piece of fried golden and burnt cake on the plate and looked at it repeatedly in front of him. This is something from the northwest, called naan, which has a sweet taste and a salty taste, and this plate for the emperor is sweet. Hasn't the emperor eaten it? This is made by Yulan. Her father is a person from the western regions, and he is the best at making naan. I don't really want to eat these days, so she made this for me to eat. And the children also like to eat it. It's Yulan? Xia Linxuan smiled. This girl, when she followed me, she hid her secrets, and now you don't want to eat, she is busy. How? Could it be that this master of mine is very harsh? Why don't you be generous? The emperor laughed. Pu Qiutai smiled slightly. Feeling that Xia Linxuan's hand around his waist had torn off the webbing, he was so frightened that he hurriedly refused, but unexpectedly the whole person was hugged tighter by the other party. And heard this bastard man laugh evilly. Compared to this naan, I still think that Qiutai is the best. Hee hee, don't think I don't know, I have nothing to do. I am either a traitor or a thief. You must have something to ask for me, it's strange if I don't ask for some compensation. Pu Qiutai's face turned red all of a sudden, and he stammered, Your Majesty, you were unreasonable, last night. Last night was clearly the second half of the night. Before he finished speaking, he exclaimed. It turned out that Xia Linxuan's big hand had already penetrated into his middle coat and gently tugged on the tip of his sensitive nipple. Are you embarrassed to say last night? If it weren't for you begging for mercy and yelling that you couldn't stand it anymore, I would have stopped my troops so quickly? Don't you know how hard it is for me to be depressed these days? Finally, the battle situation in the northern frontier finally won a decisive victory, and you can't satisfy my excitement. Tisk, Qiutai, it's not that I said you. Your physical strength should also be exercised. This is still broad daylight. Pu Qiutai desperately pulled the hand that was raging in his clothes. He did have something to ask Xia Linxuan. I feel that His Majesty the Emperor is also quite honest these days, who knows that the news of the great victory has just come from the northern Xinjiang. and he has reverted to his old ways. Pu Qiutai regrets this in his heart, don't mention it, and secretly said, didn't I send sheep into the tiger's mouth? Not in broad daylight? Okay, then tonight. How about I fight you for 300 rounds tonight? If you don't agree, I'll fix you now. Xia Linxuan shamelessly asked for conditions, and that hand deftly lit a fire on Pu Qiutai's body. Only wheezing at the other party's sensitive body, and even fine sweat oozed from his smooth forehead. Good. Well, Pu Qiutai really couldn't resist Xia Linxuan's offensive. Since he entered the palace, he found that his body was becoming more and more out of his control, and he was often provoked by this bastard, so he couldn't restrain himself. In order to avoid the embarrassment at the moment, he had to agree to Xia Linxuan. Anyway, he escaped the catastrophe in front of him first. Well, that's pretty much it. Xia Linxuan withdrew his hand and looked at Pu Qiutai with a smile. Okay, what does Qiutai ask me for? Let's get it straight. Both children miss their parents very much. So, the minister thought, can you send them back to live for a few days? Let them also reunite with their parents. Seeing that Xia Linxuan was in a good mood, Pu Qiutai hurriedly said his request, and sure enough, he saw that the other party's face sank. Your Majesty, your minister. The minister hasn't begged you for anything. Just this little thing. Pu Qiutai looked at Xia Linxuan pitifully. For such a long time, he was not completely without growth, at least he knew that in front of Xia Linxuan. If he used a little mourning strategy, the effect would be very good. Xia Linxuan naturally knew that Pu Qiutai knew more and more about how to use the favor he gave him. But he just looked at those warm eyes, and he couldn't say anything if he refused. After thinking about it, he said secretly, Qiutai really didn't ask me for anything, and this is not a big deal. Thinking of this, he nodded and said indifferently, it's okay to let them go back, but it's just a matter of staying for 3 days. Qiutai, you'd better tell that family. Don't have any idea of escaping, otherwise, no matter how much you plead, it will be impossible to stop my murderous intent, do you understand? I understand. Pu Qiutai immediately smiled, thought about it and sighed. Why does the emperor want to ask this more? The minister felt that although their family was not free now, they could finally live in peace and live in fear. If you run away, it will be even worse. Is it better to run away? Your Majesty, these are not only known to the ministers, but they are too. Naruto also has a number in his heart. Well, you're right. Xia Linxuan nodded. Okay, it's good to be able to see it. Their family is not particularly harsh. If there is anything good in your palace and you want to send it, pick up a few things, and send them with those 2 children. Pu Qiutai was overjoyed. Thanks to Xia Linxuan's grace, there were indeed a lot of good things in his palace. Thinking that the Zhu family would live like a prisoner in this capital, and he would send some gold and silver to eat and wear or something, which could alleviate their embarrassing situation.